He was supposed to be a doctor, but fell in love with flight as a young boy and never gave up his dream of flying. He proved himself in the war over Europe and demonstrated in a series of bold missions that he could not only fly, but lead. He played an instrumental role in the development and deployment of the B-29 Flying Fortress, and every pilot who flew that plane flew it the way he taught them. And when the Manhattan Project bore its terrible fruit, the job of ending World War II fell to him. He planned the mission, set up the training and logistics to support it, and when the president gave the order, he flew the plane that ushered in the atomic age.
To think of Paul Tibbetts as just the commander of the aircraft that dropped the first atomic weapon is to do the man a little bit of a disservice. It was truly a defining moment in the world history. But Tibbetts himself had been an outstanding pilot.
He is General Paul Tibbetts, and he is a legend of air power. Paul Tibbetts was born in Quincy, Illinois, on February 23, 1915. His father, a strict disciplinarian, served in World War I and never recovered from the death and destruction he witnessed there. After the war, he moved his family to Florida and got a job as far away from the military as he could, selling candy for the Curtis Candy Company.
When we got old enough to know what I was talking about, why, my father told me I was going to become a doctor. Having learned earlier not to disagree with him, and openly, I believed him. I believed him until I got my first airplane ride at the age of about 12.
Tibbetts' first flight was over the Hialeah racetrack in Miami. He flew in a biplane and helped the pilot throw candy bars down on the crowd as promotion. His father, down on the ground, disapproved of his son's obvious love of flight.
I knew that I was going to have to be a pilot. I didn't tell my dad, because I didn't have nerve enough at age 12 to say anything.
Tibbetts' family sent him to Western Military Academy in Alton, Illinois, where he played football with future fighter ace Butch O'Hare. Tibbetts went on to the University of Florida. Florida lacked a medical school at the time, so Tibbetts transferred to the University of Cincinnati. During the summers back in Florida, he snuck off to sunny South Airfield for flying lessons. Without telling his parents, he enlisted in the Army and drove from Cincinnati to Wright Field in Dayton for a flight physical. A few weeks later, he was sworn in as a flight cadet and ordered to San Antonio for training. He took a train to Florida, dreading the conversation with his father.
Finally, I got my nerve right up to peak, and I looked at him and I said, I want to tell you, I'm leaving college. I'm going to go down to flying school at San Antonio, Texas, learn to be a pilot in the Army Air Corps. He looked at me, he said, you know, I've been supporting you ever since you've been little, and I've been sending you through school. But since you're leaving school, you're on your own from here on. And go kill yourself. I don't give a damn.
Tibbetts' mother was more understanding and encouraged him to follow his dream. But Tibbetts' relationship with his father was changed forever. And as he reported to San Antonio, he felt as if one life had ended and a new life was beginning. Tibbetts earned his wings in 1938. Clearly the outstanding pilot in his class, he surprised everyone by choosing multi-engine aircraft instead of fighters. He believed he would have more independence flying reconnaissance and spent the next 2 years logging hundreds of hours in ungainly observation craft. In 1941, he became Group Engineering Officer of the 3rd Attack Group. He trained in the A-20, the Army Air Force's new low-level attack bomber. Reassigned in early December to fly B-18s on anti-submarine patrol, Tibbetts was on his way to his new base when he heard of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The entry of the United States into the war, of course, changed everything. the Army Air Force changed Tibbets' assignment to B-17s. The training pace was frantic as Tibbets and the other flyers struggled to learn the almost entirely new art of strategic bombing. For 6 months, they flew hour after hour to targets hundreds of miles away, practicing for the battles to come. After 6 months of dry runs and pretend bombing, with the United States newly at war and completely unprepared for what would follow, Tibbets and the 97th Bomb Group got their overseas orders. In the summer of '42, Tibbets took off from Bangor, Maine, to fly the Great Circle route to England. There he knew the war awaited him. When Captain Paul Tibbetts arrived in Europe, England seethed with war. The Battle of Britain had been fought and won. The RAF controlled the skies over England, and the threat of a German invasion no longer loomed large. Still, the survival of Great Britain remained in enough doubt that the English exported most of their scientific research to the safer shores of North America. Among those who left were scientists working on advanced radar and a small group of German expatriates who were gradually unraveling the secrets of the atom. Thousands of Americans flooded the countryside, taking up residence in hastily constructed air bases at the ends of mud roads. The skies were filled with bombers and fighters, an air force unlike any ever assembled, with a single mission: hit Germany, and hit it hard. Though just one of hundreds of young captains, Tibbets stood out. He and his crew seemed more ready for war than the other crews. And for that reason, the Army Air Force chose him to lead the first American daylight attack against German-occupied Europe. While nominally under the command of General Ira Eaker, Tibbets handled the operational details and execution. On August 17, 1942, 18 B-17s took off from England to bomb a train yard near the French city of Rouen. The mission went off without a hitch, and all 18 planes returned home safely. In late 1942, the European Command tapped Tibbets to fly General Mark Clark on a secret mission from England to Gibraltar. Clark was laying the groundwork for Operation Torch, the American invasion of North Africa. Clark's mission was to meet with Admiral Darlan, the commander of the French colony of Algeria, to find out if the French Navy in Algiers would resist the American invasion. Tibbets flew Clark around occupied Europe, staying low over the Atlantic Ocean the whole time. Clark's negotiations with Darlan went well, and the French admiral agreed not to resist the American invasion. Clark returned, and with a glowing report, not only about Darlan, but also about the young pilot who had executed the dangerous flight with so little apparent trouble. So it was no surprise when a few weeks later, Tibbets got the job of flying Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower and his entourage to Gibraltar to observe the actual invasion.
We're standing there waiting, and it's almost midnight at night because the weatherman from the base had come in. Each time, weather was still, marginal for takeoff even. They just said it was dangerous. Last time, we're standing under the airplane, and he comes up, and he looks at General Eisenhower, and he says, "General, I cannot promise you any better weather than this for the next 4 days." He said, "It's terrible, but that's my forecast. We'll have the same thing for 4 days." And Eisenhower looked at Jimmy Doolittle, and he said, "Jimmy, what should we do?" Doolittle looked right back at him and said, "Don't ask me, General. Paul's flying the airplane. He's the man." And with that, I was looking at General Eisenhower. I said, "General Eisenhower, I realize the importance of you and your staff and the people, but if I'd been here alone, I'd have been gone by this time. I wouldn't have been waiting all this time. I'd been gone." And he said, "Let's go. I got a war waiting on me."
Tibbets took off in a pea soup fog. Eisenhower sat on a board propped between seats in the cockpit. Once again, Tibbets flew low to stay out of sight of patrolling German fighters. He covered more than 1,000 miles, only a few feet above the tops of the waves. He got Eisenhower to Gibraltar just as the invasion started, only a few minutes after the first paratroops landed. The ground crew was amazed. Tibbets' plane was encrusted with salt from flying so low over the ocean. Eisenhower told his staff that Captain Tibbets was the best pilot he'd ever flown with.
I had stayed pretty close to the Whitecaps in that. I always talked about that. And Eisenhower later complimented me and, so that sort of thing about what a nice ride he had. And I didn't know it for just a year ago. Eisenhower held a private pilot's license. He had earned it as a first lieutenant in the Philippines.
Doolittle apparently agreed with Eisenhower. After letting the captain fly a few more combat missions over North Africa, the general had him transferred to the 12th Air Force, which was trying to adapt to the B-26 Marauder. The Marauder was a nasty airplane, finicky in flight and difficult to control. Tibbets, however, quickly mastered the plane and seemed adept at helping those around him master the aircraft as well. Halfway around the world in Wichita, Kansas, Boeing was fighting to tame the Air Corps' newest bomber, the B-29 Super Fortress. A huge plane capable of carrying a massive bomb load, the B-29 was a strategic planner's dream that had turned into a pilot's nightmare. Since rolling off the assembly line, the B-29 had killed the only crew that knew how to fly it. The Army Air Force needed a pilot who could come in, get a handle on the plane, and in effect save what was at that time the most expensive weapon system in history. In July 1943, Tibbets reported to Boeing in Wichita. A line of B-29s sat parked on a taxiway. They were huge, technologically advanced, and, without crews to fly them, absolutely useless. Tibbets looked around, shook a few hands, and asked an engineer if he knew how to start the plane's engines. When the engineer said he could, Tibbets grabbed a pilot who was walking by and told him they were going flying.
He said, I've never been in one. I don't know how to fly it. I said, don't make a difference. I haven't been in one either, but we're going to fly this airplane. And with that, now, not trying to be funny, but I knew damn well if it flew like an airplane, I could fly it.
Tibbets and his stunned co-pilot taxied back and forth on the runway, getting a feel for the plane. Tibbets tested the brakes and the ailerons, stopping now and then to cool the engines, which were designed for the cold temperatures at high altitude. And then, with a small crowd looking on and wondering if he had lost his mind, he took off. Over the next few days, he and his improvised crew logged 10 hours in the unflyable bomber.
I did do the Phase 5 flight test for the factory and the government because there was nobody to fly that airplane in thunderstorms and things like that. But they wanted to measure stresses and strains, and I got to like the airplane, and I was really happy with it.
After mastering the aircraft and documenting its flight characteristics, Tibbets set up the school that trained every B-29 pilot who fought in the war. It was at that school that Tibbets was first approached about the mission that would etch his name forever in the history books. Walking into the ready room after flying a training mission, a mysterious captain approached him and started asking questions. Tibbets apparently gave the right answers, because after a few minutes, the captain introduced Tibbets to a second, older man.
Young man. And he said, I want to tell you about the Manhattan Project. So he gave me an outline about splitting. First off, he said, do you know anything about atoms? And I said, no.
The massive research effort to design an atom bomb had been going on for years. It was called the Manhattan Project, a code name designed to mislead those who stumbled across its paper trail into thinking it had something to do with sewers in New York City. In fact, it was the most monumental engineering project in history, a crash program to turn the most esoteric area of theoretical science into a working weapon.
They knew that it would do something. They knew, well, yes, it'll drop 100,000 tons of TNT, but what's 100,000 tons of TNT? Or how much, no one knew. No one ever seen that much in one place at one time.
The program was, by almost any measure, an amazing success. And as the first test of a nuclear bomb approached, the last piece of the puzzle became not scientific or technical, but logistical. How to deliver the bomb to the target. Doing that was not going to be easy. There were two designs for an atom bomb, and both were too big to fit in the bomb bays of even a B-29. The explosion itself would be so large that it might incinerate the crew that delivered the weapon. So a new type of mission would have to be designed. All of this would require the assembly and training of a logistics train stretching from the United States to the target. Hundreds of crewmen, mechanics, and other support personnel working in secretive isolation.
I was confident enough. I knew I could do it. I mean, at that time, I had so much confidence that you can't imagine. I'd been successful in everything I'd undertaken. To put an airplane together to carry a bomb, to get the people to fly them, maintain them, and all that sort of thing, I had no problem with them.
Tibbetts' reputation was not only that he was extremely competent, yes, but he was also a wonderful pilot, and he was also a leader of men. He had demonstrated that time and time again, and he had also demonstrated his abilities firsthand to major figures in the United States Army. So they knew who this man was.
Ken, it's difficult to imagine a person who would have been better qualified.
Wow.
Or have done it better.
The Army could do little to help Tibbetts do his job because no one had ever done what he was charged with doing. He was given a vote of confidence that included a caveat. Do it right, you're a hero. Do it wrong, you may go to jail. Armed only with his own knowledge and a code word, silver plate, that would get him whatever he wanted without question, Tibbetts went to work setting up what became the 509th Composite Group.
And General Ed had told me when I left his office, he said, you go by a window over Utah and take a look at it. If you like that place, you can have it. He said, if you don't like that, go to South, forgotten where field in South Dakota. And then he gave me one in Kansas. He said, if you like them, you can have them. If you don't like them, we'll hunt for one you will like.
Tibbetts liked Wendover just fine. Located on the Utah-Nevada border, it was only a few hours from the Los Alamos nuclear test site, so Tibbetts' crew could support the ballistics testing of the prototype bombs. It existed in self-sufficient isolation. No one would go off base for a drink and give away any secrets. Or so Tibbetts thought, until he got word from intelligence agents that a couple of his mechanics had been bragging about their secret mission in Salt Lake City. Tibbetts hauled them into his office.
You know, you're talking, you're breaking security in wartime. I said, I've got to debate whether I ought to put you in front of a court-martial and have you shot, or whether what I would do. Go back to barracks and stay there. And you're limited to the barracks and the mess hall. That's the only places you can go. You can't go to the exchange, you can't go anywhere else.
Fortunately, information about what exactly Tibbetts was doing was so tightly controlled that even the people working for him had no idea what they were working on.
You had to have a green airplane, a green pass to get on an airplane. You had to have an orange pass to get into the area of the ordnance people. Just to be in the camp that we had, you had to have a white pass. So everybody had three passes if they were going either to the airplanes or the other to the ordnance section. Well, those were very few and far between, obviously.
The 509th formed officially in December 1944 and quickly grew to more than 200 officers and 1,500 men, almost all of them completely mystified about their location, their mission, and the heavy security that surrounded them.
Whoever chose Tibbetts chose well. Tibbetts is a remarkable leader. You discover this instantly if you talk to the people that he led during World War II. He is a remarkable organizer. He is a leader, an organizer, an airman. He has just many personal qualities that I think just kind of stand out.
Tibbetts asked for and got 15 brand new B-29s, stripped of armament and armor, modified with fast-opening bomb bay doors, equipped to carry a single 10,000-pound bomb.
Now, the way I worked it in the States was easy, keep them flying over the West where there's nothing, but I wanted them to get over water training, and I arranged to get Batista Field in Havana, Cuba, where I could send 3 airplanes at a time down there, let them stay there for a couple of weeks. They flew over water at night, they flew over water in the daytime. They had to use the sun, all the daylight flights, They had to use the stars on the night flights, and they got very good at what they were doing.
The 509th started moving to the Pacific island of Tinian in the spring of 1945. Tinian was the American air base closest to Japan, and the 509th set up its operations separate from everyone else on the island.
The special training the crews received, it was primarily to increase accuracy, and then they also had to know that they could not use the normal technique for bombing. Normally, you fly straight and level over a target, you drop your weapons, and they fall below the aircraft, and they fall basically under the aircraft until they hit the ground. You cannot do that with an atomic weapon because the blast will come straight up, the mushroom clouds we're familiar with. So they had to develop a new technique, and the crews had to be prepared for this, which once the weapon was dropped, the plane would immediately make a sharp turn and dive away so they would be out of the blast range.
Along with his pilots and mechanics, there was a group of nuclear technicians who would assemble the bomb. President Truman was at the Potsdam Conference when he was informed that the first test of a working nuclear device was a success. The explosion, far from population centers in the New Mexico desert, was like nothing the world had ever seen. On the way back from the conference, Truman gave the order to go forward with the atomic bombing of Japan. At 2 o'clock in the morning, August 6, 1945, Tibbetts' plane, the Enola Gay, began its long roll down the runway on Tinian. Once in the air, the technicians aboard finished the final assembly of the bomb, which was nicknamed Little Boy. The flight was uneventful. Japanese radar detected the Enola Gay and its escort just after dawn and broadcast an alert. At 8:16, the Enola Gay's bombardier released Little Boy over the center of Hiroshima.
No regrets, whatever. I've never lost a night's sleep. I've never lost 15 minutes sleep. This was war. I didn't carry the war with me. I didn't start the war. I had a job to do during wartime, and nothing personal entered into that. I was going to do what I was told to do.
Tibbetts put the plane into a steep dive to gain speed, swung back in the direction he had come from. He pressed the throttles forward, and when the protective goggles he had been instructed to wear kept him from seeing his instruments, he took them off. He needed 8 miles between him and the explosion for his crew to survive the shockwave. They made it, barely, and when they got back to Tinian, they were greeted as heroes. 8 days later, the war was over. The flight over Hiroshima was Colonel Paul Tibbetts' last combat mission.